ripping out all of your orange tile that you put in your bathroom, that's something else. But if you're going to be there forever, then just do it.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's very good advice. Very good advice. But I think people also have a mentality about gold being like 1980s.
Mm-hmm. So and it's not anymore.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I think it sticks in people's mind like gold is a hard no, and I've heard that before too.
So neurodivergency is a general term, and it's meant to describe people whose brains work differently.
Dimmers have been a thing for years, but I think it's back then and up until now it was more or less for just ambiance, right? Not necessarily for function.
And you can actually there's certain companies that will take photographs and digitize them, and that becomes your wallpaper. So yeah, it's great.
So you can, put your husband's face all over the wall in the bathroom.
I'm sure he'd love that. Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Design Discussions with Nadine. My name is Nadine, and today's guest is Crystal Reeves of CLR Design Services. She's an interior designer, and we're going to talk today about some very interesting topics and of course all things interior design. So thank you, Crystal, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So my first question to you is, well, there's two questions. How long have you been an interior designer, and what got you into this field to begin with? What drove you to become an interior designer?
So I've been in the industry about 25 years, and I've had my own company. February 1st will be 11. So I'm educated in interior design. I've got a bachelor's in interior design, but I did not know that's what I wanted to do when I went to school. I was undecided for 2.5 years. So I took an aptitude test at school, and it gave me a list of like 25 things. So I'd always been kind of artsy as a kid, but grew up with a single mom, not really exposed to interior design. And so one of the professions that came out was interior design, and I thought, oh, okay, yeah, let's try that. And so I took a couple of art classes in school because I thought, if I can't draw, how am I going to be an interior designer? And so it just took off from there, and I've had a couple of different types of industry-related jobs along the way, but now I work for myself, and I love it. So yeah.
And that's really good. And I think I hear that a lot from people, whether it be an interior designer or architects, that you were an artsy type kid. So I think that that's quite common, right? To get into either of those fields, to where you have this artistic side of you and then kind of just make your way in one direction or another. So that's really good. What would you say is your specific design style? Do you have one, or is there a certain design style that you prefer doing over others?
I mean, I think any good designer worth their salt can do any design style. So whether it's like super traditional, Queen Anne, antiques, or super contemporary where everything is stainless and really slick and pristine, I think any designer can do them all. My personal flavor I love is more transitional to contemporary. I like cool design details like you have on your wall. I like putting in some kind of fun, different, sometimes odd things. I did a show house where some of the artwork was framed pictures where there's actual bugs riding tricycles. Oh. So I just think, because that was a show house, I could do kind of fun, whatever. And I actually sold that artwork to somebody that came to the show house and saw it. So, I mean, that's very particular. That's not everybody's jam, but so I love doing kind of fun and different, and I love working with color. And a lot of people are afraid of color, but I try to stretch people. That's my job. That's what I tell my clients. Look, show me what you like, but I'm going to put some unexpected things in there, and just to stretch you. And so that's what I love.
And I think that when it comes to color, there's a fear in, I like this right now, but am I going to like it in 6 months or 1 year? And then there's also the very organic neutrals that are always floating around everywhere right now. So I think that is in everybody's face, as far as it has to be creams and whites and tans. Yeah. And when you see these pictures on Pinterest or Instagram, people see them and they're like, oh, these are beautiful. But then it's like, yeah, it's kind of bland at the same time. So I am right with you there. Add some pop of color somewhere to make it interesting. Yeah,
and there's different ways to add color when it's not so scary. So like painting sheetrock is really inexpensive to change over time. Ripping out all of your orange tile that you put in your bathroom, that's something else. But if you're going to be there forever, then just do it.
Yeah.
You know?
No, that's very good advice. Very good advice. So keeping on with the same design type questions, I loved the questions that when we talked about that through email, when you talked about mixing metals, because I think that's another fear people have, because I think that comes from maybe this builder grade thing where everything in the house is the same metal, and so people think, is that how it's supposed to be? But I love the mixing of metals. And is there a right or a wrong way to do that? Or for you as an interior designer, how would you do it if somebody says, well, I like brushed gold, but I also like matte black, or I also like bronze? Like, how would you approach that, and what would be your advice to somebody who wants to mix different metals, and how should they approach that?
So I think it's all about balance. It's not necessarily about which finishes you use where, but how it's all balanced. So if some clients will come to me and just go, I hate gold, do not put gold in my house. So other than that, we're kind of free to choose. So then it comes down to functionality. What shows fingerprints more? What doesn't? Is that going to drive you nuts? You know, if you have, like, I love polished nickel. I'll take polished nickel over polished chrome any day. I'll also take polished nickel over brushed nickel because it's the shiny and the bright. But not everybody loves that in a kitchen because it does show water spots. It can be wiped off. But if that's going to make you nuts, then let's do a brush finish. Or if you love like the matte black, I love matte black, I love high contrast. But if you have really hard water, that matte black faucet or that matte black faucet handle is going to show that more. So that's my next question to them, like, how tolerant are you? So maybe we can do some of the polished things in your powder room where you're not having to deal with this on a daily basis. So, but you can mix a stainless sink with a black faucet, and then you can do, you know, the stainless pulls. So you can also balance that with the color of the cabinet. So maybe your plumbing fixtures are black, but your perimeter cabinets are black, but the pulls on your cabinets are nickel. So it's just all about that balance.
So that's good too. I mean, that was a good tip about asking about the water spots and things like that. Will it make you crazy? And then going back to, you mentioned people hating gold.
Yeah.
And I think
I love gold.
I love it too, especially in bathrooms.
Yeah.
I think it's just so luxurious and beautiful looking, but I think people also have a mentality about gold being like 1980s. So
and it's not anymore.
Yeah, no, I think it sticks in people's mind like gold is a hard no, and I've heard that before too.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny. And then, so when people are looking into lighting and chandeliers or pendants, is there a general consensus on sizing? Let's say, for instance, above a island in their kitchen.
So yes and no. So it all comes down to scale. And, you know, if you have an 8-foot island, sure, you can fit 3 pendants, but what do those pendants look like? If you're going for a minimalist feel and you want to do really, you know, skinny pendants, then yeah, 3. But if we're doing, you know, big drum shades, then 3 might not necessarily fit. So when I'm planning something out, I'll put in, you know, maybe placeholders, and then as we're selecting the fixtures, then we decide on the size. But if you have a really large one that's got a clear glass shade, you can do a much bigger fixture than one that has a linen shade. So a lot of it is the visual weight, and I think sometimes clients, when they're selecting light fixtures on their own, they don't realize that when they have it. Or they might have like a clear shade in the middle and it's got a metal frame around it. So the metal frame around it might say, oh, it's 14 inches diameter, but when you get it, it doesn't feel that big.
I had a client that we just finished their couple bathrooms and their flooring and their kitchen, and she wanted us to change some other light fixtures in the house as well, and she was trying to pick one for her dining room, and that scenario happened. She found one online and she ordered it. It hasn't even arrived yet, but I was at her home checking on the project, and we were talking, and she's like, oh, let me show you this chandelier that I ordered, and, you know, let me know if it's going to work. It's so beautiful. And it was like literally just like that. It was very small inside and then just a very thin outside, and I think the whole diameter on that one was like 14 inches. I'm like, and she has a huge dining table. I'm like, you might want to reconsider that. It might look a little puny
Yep.
above
Yep.
your table. And that's true. It's hard when you're looking online, especially when it comes to those things, because you can't really get that visual of how it's going to look once it's installed.
Yeah,
So
it's the overall weight of the design of the fixture. And it's not just, is it made out of glass or is it made out of a linen shade? But what else is going on? Do you have drops of crystals? Do you have leaves or things sticking out? So,
And I think lighting is a challenging piece of the puzzle when it comes to design to choose. Not only for the sizing, but there's so many options out there. So when you can work with a client to really narrow down a good lighting fixture that they love, that's impressive.
well,
Because
and
it's hard. I think lighting's hard. I want to change some lighting in my house too, and I'm like, I just don't know. So I've been putting it off because I'm like, it's hard. It's hard
It is.
choice.
And for wall sconces too, that's a whole nother subject, because the back plate on a wall sconce is anywhere on the wall sconce. And so, and then a lot of the newer styles have very small back plates. And so your standard J-box, 4 inches, but a lot of these cleaner ones have a 3-inch back plate. And so sometimes just doing a small, what I call like a pancake box, that still isn't good enough. So you have to know that ahead of time. And not only that, but the height. And so the height of that J-box, if it's the bottom of the sconce, you may be installing it here when the light is here. So it's a lot of things to consider.
Yeah, another important planning.
Yeah.
Just like lots of things when it comes to interior design and construction, there's lots of planning.
Yeah.
So the next topic I want to talk about is a pretty important one, and I know you have personal connection to this particular topic, and I think this is a topic that people don't know too much about. I think right now it's getting more and more mainstream to talk about these things, and that's neurodivergent when it comes to design. And it's very interesting to me. I started kind of looking into this, a few months ago. I had my assistant went to a AIA event where they spoke about this, and it's so interesting because it's something that people don't really consider or talk about. So let's delve into that and talk about that, because I think it's going to be really interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, so neurodivergency is a general term, and it's meant to describe people whose brains work differently. So it can describe someone who has autism, ADHD, dyslexia. It covers a lot of things. So you'll hear people describe people on the spectrum. But I also know that studies have been shown that 1 in 8 people are neurodivergent. And of that 8, some of those people don't even know. So it's not that you can't function, but how can we function better? So in design and construction and architecture, we talk a lot about universal design. And when you think of universal design, a lot of attention is paid to like an aging population. We're doing levers instead of knobs, because as you get arthritis or you get older or you break your hand, you can't turn that knob, so you're turning levers. So people are thinking of universal design as people who have a disability. So people that are neurodivergent, they think differently, they process things differently. So my daughter is ADHD and she's OCD and has a tic disorder. Super high functioning, brilliant individual. So, and I've had a couple of clients that a live-in elderly mother had dementia. And although that's not neurodivergent, it's still the way you perceive the space. Yeah. And then I've had a client with autistic children, grown children. So talking about sometimes they struggle with different textures or the way light comes in a room or lack of outdoor light and paint colors and things like that. So doing design, even if you don't have a client who is specifically neurodivergent, we can make people's lives easier. Like, it doesn't have to be this hard. So thinking when you design universally, design for people who think and perceive the space differently. So it's how you're experiencing the space, not just how a space looks.
That's interesting. And I know you said you had been taking courses on this to learn more about it, right?
Yeah, so I'm doing a lot of research because it's obviously something that's near and dear to me. I do put some of these elements in clients' homes, but I'm also working on developing a continuing education class for designers and architects, circling around this.
Okay. So looking at the neurodivergent situations when it comes to interior design and construction, What are the key elements that people should look at? So say, if, we have a customer, I know you said you've had clients that have had this, somebody that during renovation, beginning of it with the demo, it was a problem because I think you mentioned that the noise would make her pass out.
Yeah, so she actually had a medical neurological condition where loud, like surprising noises and bangs would make her pass out. So she disclosed that to me in the very beginning. Her husband is actually an architect of healthcare hospitals. And he was just like, residential is just, I don't even know what to do. But so having that discussion with her ahead of time before we even selected a builder. So she didn't have any builders. She came to me and was like, hey, who do you know? So I gave her a couple names, but before I gave her the names, I spoke to those builders and said, hey, is this something that we can work around? Like, because they wanted to live there while we were doing the process. So that, like, there are going to be days that we will tell you ahead of time that you need to not be there.
Yeah.
And then this was the same client who was taking care of her elderly mother with dementia at the home.
Wow.
So working with your builder, your contractor with the schedule, telling them up front, and I know people are very private with the struggles they have, but that affected her safety and her ability to live in her home. So we had to be very upfront with that.
So what is generally looked at? What are like maybe the 3 key things that people look at when it comes to renovating or designing a home for somebody that has one of these conditions?
So obviously safety is huge. So floor coverings, type of floor coverings you use, but also the colors you use in the space. So, and it depends, if I may design a space differently if there's not a known issue versus this other client that I said that had a known issue. So my questions like around color. Are there certain colors that really trigger them? Because what triggers this person may not trigger that person. Now, if a lot of people know, blues and greens are calming, orange and reds are energetic, but for someone that's like neurodivergent, for instance, sometimes they need the calmer colors, sometimes they need to be stimulated. And it's counterintuitive, but I see that with my daughter a lot. So having different spaces in the home.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe a bathroom that's different from maybe a bedroom, of course, space that is more calming, or the general living space may need to be a more calming color because it's a larger space in the home.
Well, and giving, the key is giving people choices. Giving people choices of which rooms to go into. So if someone living there is neurodivergent, having more than, say, just their bedroom, but like within their bedroom, having a way that they can close off and kind of be in a little cave. If you're building new beds, say it's a kid's room, then you can put, little curtains on the beds or something like that. But color's huge, and light is huge because neurodivergent people tend to be sensitive to light, smells, textures. So always having dimmers on every light in the house, which I have done for years because I just give clients choices, but in doing a lot of research with the neurodivergent, choice is huge with them. So not just having a dimmer on every light, but having, the cans are on one light, your decorative fixtures on a second light, this light is on another switch. So talking to that person, okay, how do they function best in this room? So my one client that I had that was autistic, so this was during Harvey, and their house was just decimated. 5 feet of water for 4 weeks. It was an issue. So she had already been kind of upended, and so I was talking to her about her room, and she's like, look, as she's okay with change, but she really likes these colors, and I was specifically asking her about the closet. How does she like that? You know what? She doesn't even use her closet. She folds everything in her dressers, and that's going to be the same. So I was like, okay, let's just, build a closet how we want. But I did very calming blue textural wallpaper, and she really liked the textures. And some people will tend to, when they get stressed, they'll tend to pick at things and destroy things, but she didn't.
Okay.
So I was able to do that. Whereas in someone else's home, maybe that wasn't something I'd want to do.
Yeah, so designing it for specifics of that particular person is very important. And I know that when you mentioned about the dimmers, dimmers have been a thing for years, but I think it's back then and up until now, it was more or less for just ambiance, right? Not necessarily for function.
Yeah, and there's a purpose to it,
Yeah.
Because whether you are neurodivergent or not, being able to have choice is key.
Yeah, That's unbelievable. All right, so you mentioned wallpaper for that particular client, and that rolls me right into my next question for you about wallpaper and whether it's in or out. I think I know the answer to this because I know my opinion on it.
Yeah.
But what would you say if somebody would come to you and ask you, oh, should I go with wallpaper or no? Is it in or not?
You know, it's funny because clients ask me that question all the time. And most of the time, they're not just asking the question. They just say, oh, wallpaper's out. It is not out. Like, wallpaper is amazing. I think when people think that or they have that opinion, it's the old cabbage rose Waverly that was in your grandmother's house, your mother's house. Or, I mean, yeah, no, I'm not doing that unless it's like a historical restoration.
Yeah.
But no, I love wallpaper because it gives you texture. A lot of times without going through a huge expense or complication of different like wood designs on your wall or having an artist come in and paint something. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, granted, if you have an artist come in and paint something, it gives you a lot more freedom. You can do whatever you want, but there's so many out there, and there's commercial grade wallpaper. And if it's installed correctly, it is not going to peel off the wall. That's the other concern that people have.
Yeah.
Is it going to come off or peel off? If it's a good quality paper, that's one thing, but it's the installation behind it that is huge. Just like prepping woodwork for paint, it's the prep. So I love wallpaper, love it.
Yeah. And the paint, the artist thing that you mentioned, there's actually wallpaper that is hand painted. Mm-hmm. And when I was in Milan for the show, the design show last April, there's a company that does hand painted wallpaper, but they can do it from whatever picture or design that you want. So I think that's amazing too. You know, it gives people really specialty wall coverings that they wouldn't necessarily get, and I think that's very interesting.
And you can actually take, there's certain companies that will take photographs and digitize them, and that becomes your wallpaper. So yeah, I mean, it's great.
So you can, put your husband's face all over the wall in the bathroom.
I'm sure he'd love that. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Put it in the toilet area of the bathroom, so when you're going to the bathroom, you just see his face everywhere. That's funny.
Yeah, I love it. Hi.
Like they do, like they have socks like that now, and boxers and things like that. I saw a funny thing, and this is totally off subject, kind of. A funny thing where they do have clothing like that, where people can send in a picture, and I saw something online. A lady had done that, and she bought boxers for her husband with her face on it. I think that's so hilarious.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh, so funny. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the Magic 3. Mm-hmm. And so let's give people some information about that, because this is something that, I guess I wasn't too familiar with as far as that term. Mm-hmm. So as an interior designer, go ahead and give us some details on what is the Magic 3 when it comes to interior design.
Okay, so the Magic 3, that's my own made up term, but it's made to describe 3 qualities of any given product that you're trying to purchase, whether that be a sofa, a light fixture, an appliance, whatever you're purchasing. So you've got quality or style, you've got the time or the time it takes to get something, and then you've got the price. So unless you have unlimited time and budget, at any given time you can only have 2 of these things that would 100% satisfy the bill. Like, I work with a lot of clients on construction, furniture, so there's always a compromise. But so for instance, if you have something that, like, I love this quality and this style, this is amazing, price is great, but I've got to wait 4 months to get it. So that's that time element. So, or if you're like, oh yeah, I love the price and I can get it really quickly, but it's really cheap product. So think Wayfair, right?
Yeah. So
you've got inexpensive product. It serves a purpose, like in a college dorm room, but I don't know that I would want that in my space. So that at any given time, you can have 2 of those elements really fit the bill, but there's going to be one element that there's a compromise on.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I like that. And let's then go into, I know we talked about, I told you I was going to ask you this question about horror stories.
Yeah.
So you've been in business a while, so I'm sure there's a few, and I know, well, in construction, there's definitely horror stories that happen.
Yes.
So let's hear your example of a horror story that you'd like to share with us that you experienced.
Yeah, so this is in regards to a show house that I worked on. So I was one of about 20 designers for an ASID show house several years ago. Beautiful house. I was one of the co-chairs on the house. So one of the spaces I did was a powder room, and I found this amazing pierced panel that I was using to put as a divider between the sink and the commode. And so we ordered it weeks ahead of time, and the builder calls me and he says, okay, you're not going to believe this, but it's lost in Louisiana.
Oh, great.
And we were supposed to have photographs in a week. They were installing it that day and had to paint it and everything. And so we hunted and hunted and hunted. Couldn't find it. The truck just randomly delivered it to some random place and no one could find it. And so I'm supposed to have photographs. And so we call the company immediately. They're like, oh my gosh. So they rushed it, got it to us. And the photographer is photographing all the different spaces. I'm like, you've got to do mine last. Mm-hmm. They are painting it as he's coming around to shoot my space.
Gosh. Talk about in a rush. Oh, that's so stressful.
Yeah. And that was a show house.
Oh, wow.
You know, so everything's got a deadline, you know, you just do what you can do. And fortunately we were able to make that work. But yeah. And then the other horror story I'll share with you is when I actually worked at a fabric and furniture wholesale showroom. So we had ordered 60 yards of custom colored mohair fabric, very expensive. Got the call from the vendor, so it just fell off the boat in the Gulf of Mexico.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, and had I not been on the phone with the actual manufacturer, I would swear that someone was lying to me. It's like, you can't make this
like
up.
The dog ate my homework type situation, right?
Yeah. So we, and this was like 6 months in the making. And so, and the client needed it for a project. And so we were like, okay, let's just scramble and look around. So in the meantime, another manufacturer had actually made some that was a close enough match that we were able to just order and get it. But that just does not happen. Yeah, 60 yards of custom fabric in the Gulf of Mexico.
Oh, wow. Well, it sounds like you have a lot of these. Maybe
do.
we should just keep going. What's the next horror story you got? I mean, well, maybe we can make a series of it.
There you go.
Horror stories by Crystal Reeves.
There you go.
Or interior design horror stories.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, but you're right. Yeah, I wouldn't have believed that at all, because that sounds like something. That sounds like something that somebody would make up. Wow. Well, I feel like this was a great conversation. I'm so happy that you joined me and gave people some good insight on the neurodivergent thing. I think that's something that people need more information on, because I think now with so many people being diagnosed more, because years ago it wasn't something that people were diagnosed with, right? Now that there's more awareness of these things, and I think with building or renovations to help people to have them a more calm space where they can function better is great. So having, especially an interior designer that has knowledge about those things and a personal connection to it is great. So if anybody has any more questions about the neurodivergent interior design, you can drop it in the comments or reach out, and I'm sure Crystal would be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have. Yeah.
I'd love to.
So thanks again for joining me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thanks for all your insight. And until then, stay tuned for the next one. Bye.